Hey, this is Mark Shepard, and welcome to Healing Pastors. This whole thing, the idea of a farm church, is starting to come together. And this week it's going to be a little bit different because I actually spoke at a church, the Brick Chapel, which is something it's actually right behind me. You can't see it because of the trees, but in the winter I can see it right from the backyard here. And it's a church that was founded by farmers in 1815, and it's only open for 4 Sundays in the summer, essentially. And there's a group of older people that have kept the faith. It's in the Presbyterian denomination, which is my childhood church where I grew up in. And I'm talking to them about collaborating with the Healing Pastors spiritual but not religious thing, but also contextualizing it with actual farming. One of the members of that church is my neighbor across the street, Elliot Rohde, who has forgotten more about cows than most people will ever know, and certainly more than I will ever know. Part of my plan is to create a community of people who are farming, who are helping each other farm, but who also recognize that this world is a miracle. The fact that we even exist, and that there's something more behind all this that just is somehow guiding it. And I want to serve that. And I have been avoiding the call to ministry for most of my life, but I want to create a ministry that is authentic for me. It isn't churchy, but is real and authentic and spiritual and filled with music. So that's what I'm offering this week. It may not be your thing, and that's okay. Please check out some of my other content if you're not into it at all. But I think there's an old saying, there's no atheists in foxholes. So there don't seem to be many atheists in farms or gardens either. And we live on this beautiful blue planet floating in the middle of the vastness of space, and we need to take care of it, and we need to take care of each other. And I think this is what my call is. It's not just to farm, it's to feed my children, said the voice in the night. And I'm just checking myself for ticks because I'm not wearing my tick repellent clothing and I'm standing still. But so that's what I'm offering. Here it is. And of course, at the end, I will make sure we have some cute animals to just ground us and remind us of why we're all here, and that we are at the same level as animals. And our job is to be stewards of this planet and to ethically and sustainably and restoratively and regeneratively grow the kinds of foods that our bodies most need to be healthy and well. Peace, love, grooviness. Here's the program. Boom. Our Old Testament scripture today is from Ecclesiastes 4:9-12. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And from the New Testament, 1 Peter 4:8-11. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. There's an old African proverb that many motivational speakers have been quoted, and it goes, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." Now, in the modern internet age, we don't know if that's really an African proverb or if somebody said it was an African proverb. So I did a little research. And there is an actual saying of the Lu people of East Africa. And it's even better. "Alone, a youth runs fast, but with an elder, slow. Together, however, they go far." I like that one. So, I come from the Presbyterian tradition, the Presbyterian Church of Yorktown Heights, and I grew up with a minister, Ronald S. James, who always did a 3-point sermon. He would tell you what he was going to tell you, then he told you, and then he told you what he told you. And so I'm going to attempt to honor the giant shoulders that I stand on today by making 3 points. 1, this church was founded and is stewarded by farmers. This community has stood here since, as it says on the sign, 1815. But here in this day and age, we face massive changes and challenges. The average age of U.S. farmers is over 60, and the average age of this congregation might be a little bit over that. The second point I want to make, the largest growing denomination is something called spiritual but not religious, which means they believe in God, but they don't go to church. And most of them are not coming here on Sunday mornings. People are voting with their feet, spirituality-wise. And on every side are friends and neighbors who consider themselves spiritual, but who have no inclination to call themselves Christian. They've been turned off to Christianity by the televangelists and the right wing. What's sad, though, is that people are trying to live good lives. They're trying to follow the call of God as they understand it in their lives, and they're lonely. They want to be inspired and connected. They want to be loved and healed, but they don't know that this is a place where that would happen. They think they'll be judged, or at least they think maybe they'll be bored. The third point I want to make is that we are in the middle of multiple revolutions, one of which is a homesteading and farming revolution going on right now that's not really being reported in the mainstream media. Most of the new farmers are younger, and they don't have the money to buy land or large expensive pieces of equipment. So they're exploring the idea of farming on other people's land. And this is something that I'm doing as well. In fact, one of my lovely landowners is here today and in support. The movement is growing, and people are growing their own food more and more. One day I was in the grocery store gazing longingly at the meat behind the butcher counter and realizing that it could be so easy to just buy one of those packaged meat products instead of going through all the things I'm going through to grow my own. But the reality is, many, many people are concerned about what they put in their bodies. And so small farms, like Elliot's farm, like what I'm trying to do, like what many other people are trying to do, have at this time more opportunity than ever. Farming radicals like Joel Salatin, who calls himself a Christian libertarian lunatic farmer, and Greg Judy, who calls himself a regenerative rancher, are preaching a new gospel of farming. And by the way, gospel just means good news. farming on land that you do not own, either leased or donated as land stewards. And one of the ideas behind that is if I have to buy 100 acres of land for umpteen millions of dollars, I have to pay that off before I make a profit from the first pound of hamburger that I sell. But if I don't own the land, and if I collaborate with the landowner who maybe can't farm anymore, then we have something that could truly change the world. Now, those are my 3 points. We'll see where we go with them. But who am I? My name is Mark Shepard, and I grew up in the Yorktown Presbyterian Church in northern Westchester County, about an hour north of New York City. Down the road from me was the last farm in Westchester County. And it was, by my teenage years, it was bought by a bunch of wealthy lawyers, and it was turned into a Holstein breeding facility. And many of the large quantity Holstein milk cattle came out of the Hanover Hilltop Farm, which was less than a mile away from me. And from that farm, you could see New York City. You could see the Empire State Building and the Twin Towers. We went to church every Sunday, and like most kids, I didn't really want to go. I didn't want to wear the uncomfortable shoes and the fancy pants. I felt itchy in them. But I went, and in 4th grade, I asked my parents if I could stop going to Sunday school and instead go to church with them. And so I got to hear the sermons, the 3-point sermons of the Reverend Ronald S. James. And in my lifetime, I have never met a better minister, a better preacher than Ronald S. James until I met a guy named the Reverend Mike here in Canton. They come from the same cloth of deeply caring people, deeply thinking and speaking from their hearts the truth that they see, and truth that we can then take into our own lives and work with for the following week. One of the things Ronald S. James did that lit me on fire, and I'm going to cry, he brought a guitar to the worship service, and we started singing 1 or 2 guitar hymns every Sunday. And it lit me up inside. And it still lights me up inside today. Somehow music fills me in a way that I cannot put into words, and it causes me to get deeply emotional. I think it was in 4th grade, one night something happened to me. Music came in. It came in with an audible sound as a blue light, and it went up the legs of my body, and I ended up standing up in my bed. I had a racing car bed theme, and I stood up on my racing car bed, and I felt this light that was music shooting out of the tips of my fingertips, and it felt so good. So alive, so powerful. And I grew up in the 1960s when the music of Peter, Paul and Mary, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan was on the radio, and it was changing the world. They were down in the civil rights movement, trying to change the minds and the hearts of what was not well in our country. And many of the songs they sang were spirituals and old hymns. The power of the Christian music filled that time. When I started writing my own songs in middle school and in early high school, the very first performances, the very first things I sang were here in a church, in the Presbyterian church. And eventually I dropped out of college and went and lived in Greenwich Village to try to become a folk musician, and it was a miserable failure. People, I discovered, really didn't want to hear the music that I was writing. The music that I was writing was too spiritual for the secular world. So I tried shifting it and becoming one of those contemporary Christian musicians. But my music wasn't Christian enough for the Christian musicians, because I used too many metaphors. Instead of saying God and Jesus all the time in my songs, I would say all that is, or light of my heart, or something similar. And so I felt like that didn't work either. But I went back to college after failing in Greenwich Village to become the next rock star. And I majored in religion at Manhattanville College, which used to be a Catholic girls' college run by the Sacred Heart nuns. It's where the Kennedy daughters were educated. And I had 3 professors. I had Cora Brady, who was still a Sacred Heart nun. I had Jean McGowan, who had left the nunnery and become more of a freelance Catholic professor. And then there was Joseph Roccasalvo, who said, he was a Jesuit priest and he was Harvard educated. He said, because I am a Hindu, I can be both a Buddhist and a Christian. And they opened my mind to a world of spirituality from the ancient Hebrews, whose great innovation was that they said there was one God, and that God was not tied to a certain location. That God went with them everywhere they went. And furthermore, the Hebrews' great innovation was that they could talk to God and they could shake their fist at God and say, hey, you gave me a bum deal, God. I need some help down here. And God did not strike them dead. God was like, okay, let's work together. That was a great innovation. And then I discovered this man, Jesus, came into the world with another innovation, that God is love. God is not a mean old king sitting on a throne, judging us and finding us bad. His stories of the prodigal son. You are welcome to come home anytime. You are welcome. God's love is eternal, and it's so beyond our comprehension that we try in our various denominations to parse it down into something that we can understand, and we can't. Not too long ago, I moved up here to be with my dad, and in my backyard, I could see this church. And I could see it at church when I went on a walk over at Boyden Brook. There's a certain spot where you can see this church poking up above the trees. And I would drive by this church, and I knew it was loosely associated with the downtown Park Street Church. And I just, one night I couldn't sleep, and I had this tossing and turning and the turning and the tossing, and I just felt inside, it wasn't a voice that was like, ba, ba, hoo, hoo, ba. It was just this inner knowing, and it said, Mark, feed my children. And I understood that voice didn't mean literally just putting food on a plate. I do all the cooking for my dad. I am his in-house chef. I love to cook. But this voice was like, feed my children, from the microbes in the soil to the sheep and the pigs and the cows, to each other, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, the full thing. We need nourishment. We are living in a culture that is more and more disconnected, isolated, and hungry. As my dad often says, we are an overfed but malnourished nation. Last July, I wasn't here one Sunday. I went down to Unity Church in Albany, where I had done a bunch of music for many years. And I had stepped away from that church, and I went down last July. I think it was this Sunday, a year ago. And I said to them, I need your support. When I was done with college, I decided to go to Princeton Seminary and become a Presbyterian minister. And the presbytery has a process they call taking a candidate under care. And I said to the Unity Church congregation last year, I said, I need you to take me under care. I am being called again to the ministry. For 40 years, I've run away from it. I've denied it. I've tried every other thing to avoid it. And there's a church that I can see from my backyard. And I feel called to be a part of their community in some shape or form, and to bring my gifts of music and speaking and storytelling to that community in some way. And I don't know what it is, but I need your support and your prayers. And I go down there on the first Sunday of every month, and I do music with them, and their encouragement continues, and I feel it right now. But I've said this to Elliot and Mary and to Marilyn, I can't separate the call I feel to grow my own food from the call I have to write my own music and the call I have to somehow use those things and combine them with spirit, with something that is large enough for even the friends of mine who go, oh, you're speaking at the Brick Chapel on Sunday. That sounds nice, but it'll probably be too churchy for me. I want to create something together that isn't too churchy, but that absolutely rings true to what the people who built this church with their own hands believed and trusted. And I have pages of pages that I was going to read. That always happens to me. I wrote it out, I practiced it, and I think I've said what I wanted to say. And I don't want to go too long. I want to finish with something that I found in the Stockman Grass Farmer. The Stockman Grass Farmer is edited by Joel Salatin, who is one of my virtual mentors. He calls himself, as I said before, a Christian libertarian lunatic farmer. And it was his mentor, Alan Nation, who founded this, who said, you don't have to own the land. You can farm without owning the land. And that was huge. For all my life, I was trying to save up money so that I could buy land, so I could farm. I am like the roadies, a many generation. My dad grew up on a farm, his dad grew up on a farm, his dad grew up on a farm, his dad grew up on a farm. One of my ancestors, David Ogden, fought in the Revolutionary War and was captured by Iroquois Indian Joseph Brant outside of Fort Stanwix, was taken by foot in March to Fort Niagara, where he ran the gauntlet, and he managed to survive. He was adopted into the Seneca family, and eventually the British moved him to Fort Oswego, and he eventually ran away and escaped. The Revolutionary War was over at that point. But then he settled down in Franklin, New York, on a farm. There are farms in all of our blood. And it is one of the hardest things to do. And farming makes possible for everyone else to have the career of their choice, to be able to go to the grocery store and just pick up a package rather than have to get up every morning and make sure those animals are still alive, and check them every night to make sure they're still alive and do all the things they have to do. And one of the dangers of farmers and homesteaders is isolation and burnout. And there's an article here that talks about extinguishing farm burnout. And there's 10 tips, I'm not going to read them, but one says, farm staffing is challenging, but don't convince yourself there's no one who wants to work or intern on your farm. Be proactive and open to building community, even though it makes you vulnerable and makes you venture outside of your comfort zone. And the other point, create an external team of vendors, staff, customers, and support. work on creating a community full of competent folks that are as varied as the day is long. The farmer's real crop should be the people that make up your community. And I would like to say, the church's real crop is the people in the community. And the farmer's real crop is the people in the community. This is something that brings everything together, body, mind, and spirit. And I'm asking this congregation to collaborate with me and help me to create something that I'm calling a farm church. But I didn't invent it. Joel Salatin suggested it in one of his essays, and this church here already is a farm church. What if we went with that? What if we talked about it and explored it and took just a few tentative steps in that direction to see if it feels right, to see if it's something that is in alignment with the call. And finally, I want to just finish, and I have no idea if I've gone too long or not. Last Sunday after the services, I went and helped my friend Corey, who is Ann's son, who we are collaboratively farming. He has animals and I have animals, and we help each other out. He's away and I'm covering for him. I go away one weekend a month and he covers for me. And I was helping him to find some newborn calves so we could tag them and band them. And we got all of them except for one, which kept running away from us. And it occurred to me, eventually we gave up. And of course, the mother of that calf that night jumped the fence, found her calf, and brought it back. We are not being chased by God. God does not chase us. God calls us and allows us to respond as we can and as we will. I have been running from the call all my life. I can't run anymore. I want to answer the call. I want to use my music. I want to use what I have to do something bigger and larger than myself that builds community, that maybe, just maybe, can make a positive difference in the world. And that's all I'm going to say. Amen. This is a song I wrote in 2006, I believe. It was inspired by a woman who went into business specifically to raise money for a group of orphanages in Uganda. And the kids in these orphanages were all HIV orphans. And I wrote this song for her because I was inspired. And the way the Spirit sometimes works, that woman brought a whole choir of those kids over, and they sang this song all across the country. And then the International Girl Scouts started singing it. And one day on YouTube, I noticed that it had millions and millions of views. And so it's out there doing something. And I want that to happen more so that I can answer this call. Here we go. I'm going to sing it, but it has a refrain. Together we can change the world. And if you'd sing that with me, that would be awesome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe it's not too late. Together we can change the world. Lay the puzzle pieces out. Find out what it's all about. Together we can change the world. Can't do it by myself, so I'm asking for your help. Together we could change the world. Sail past where it's been charted. Roll your sleeves up, let's get started. Together we could change the world.
our hands and with our hearts, we can dare to make a start. Together we can change the world. What if we spoke with one voice, knowing that we have a choice? Together we can change the world. Can't do it by myself, so I'm asking for your help. Together we can change the world. Sail past where it's been charted, roll your sleeves up, let's get started. Together we could change the world. Together we can change the world. Change your mind and change your life. Set aside the fear and strive. Together we can change the world. When we open up our eyes, then we start to realize together we can change the world. Can't do it by myself, so I'm asking for your help. Together we could change the world. Sail past where it's been charted, roll your sleeves up, let's get started. Together we could change the world. Can't do it by myself, so I'm asking for your help. Together we could change the world. Sail past where it's been charted, roll your sleeves up, let's get started. Together we could change the world. Together we can change the world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe it's not too late. Together we can change the world.
The ducks are very, very loud today. So I hope you enjoyed that. I will see you again next week. I do a Sunday message every week, and I try to tie in what I'm doing on the farm with some lesson, some spiritual but not religious, fundamental truth that can hopefully help you, as well as myself, make it through the next week. Hope you have a great week. As always, sending out prayers of love, support, encouragement, peace, love, grooviness. Amen. Boom.